Hi, my name is Will Franz. Welcome back to Trail and Ultra Running Training. The whole goal of this podcast is to help you train a little better for trail and ultra, which, you would expect from the title. Um, if you appreciate the information you hear, please share it somehow, just directly with a person, or you can do the subscribe thing or rate and review, whatever you can do to help spread it into the ether a little bit. I would really appreciate. Anyway, today let's talk about an email I sent out yesterday. I send a few emails out a week. I kind of think they're useful. If you don't, great, unsubscribe. But a few people responded to this one, which is not usually the case. And they were all lovely responses. Thank you to those who did. But it was just a short, kind of pithy email about things we don't need to do to pursue this big goal that is a ultra marathon. And I think a lot of the time when we start a fitness journey of any sort, be it fat loss or ultras or whatever, we get lost in the minutia and start trying to major in the minors, and it just doesn't, none of it helps, right? So that's really, really frustrating. And it's a nice thing to reset occasionally and remember that we just have to get going and we don't need to stress this too much. And I see this more in the health and fitness space, like the strength training, fat loss, whatever community, partially just because it's a bigger community. And I do kind of exist there online, even though I don't really participate because I hate it and find it predatory and it screwed me up in my teens. So that's why I don't participate too much. But I do know it exists and I see a lot of this stuff. And so whenever someone like Dave Asprey comes up on my, and if you don't know who Dave Asprey is the bulletproof coffee guy. He is the person who 25 years ago convinced pretty much everyone that putting butter and MCT oil in your coffee would help you lose fat somehow. And yeah, it kind of worked, but it largely worked because that was paired with this big cut into intermittent fasting, which yes, will help you lose fat. It also leads to a lot of bingey things. I currently struggle with food things as an athlete because of originally losing weight in more of an intermittent fasting space. It is tough for me to remember to eat enough on a fairly regular basis and push towards injuries and all these things, right? So for one, remember the diet that you read that tends to be popular in America is probably not geared towards an athlete. So if you're working towards that, I feel you and am here as a support. But back to Dave, we also end up with just pushing the thing that sells weird, like this weird keto oil coffee that he pushed was successful because there's this big story about him discovering it while traveling through Nepal, and then keto, which wasn't a big thing yet, and it just sounded strange. So people tried it, and he says that the six chain medium chain fatty acid, that whatever is in it is good for your brain and makes you smarter. And if we know anything about Dave Asprey, um, there's a couple other things he's really open about. One, he's on, and I'm not shaming him for either of these things. I think it's great. Do what you want, but don't use that to manipulate people. So he also um, is on Provigil a lot, which is a big, stimulant. I forget what it was originally prescribed for, but it's a pharmaceutical grade, basically stimulant that, yeah, of course, you're going to have your brain's going to be on fire when you basically do meth. And then he is also on hormone replacement therapy for testosterone. So yeah, you don't need to sleep as much because you don't get penalized for not sleeping because you get your testosterone elsewhere. So if you're on testosterone and something like Provigil or modafinil or any of these pharmaceutical stimulants that you want to do, and then you turn around and talk about how big pharma is killing people and you need to do That's the weirdest thing he said. I think he said something about injecting urine once, and he like wears these goofy glasses and sells like very expensive supplements for people. My guess, my bet, if I had to guess what was making him feel good, would be on the testosterone and the Provigil, but that's just me. So we don't need to do these crazy things that we see on the internet in order to have success in whatever journey we're on. And I see that level of it less, if at all, in the running community. But I still think that we end up a little bit in the space of too much information. So we get this paralysis and then we don't start. You don't need to do 1,000 things to start whatever journey you're on. You just need to start. Like today, go for a run. Go for a run today. And then maybe do it again tomorrow if it feels good. And focus on your form. Do the thing. Go run up a mountain. This is how we're going to get better. You don't need to be a monk either, though. Like we don't need to sacrifice every other thing that we do in order to perform well in ultramarathon. Yes, it's probably going to take time. You're probably going to need to put in a bunch of work. You're going to need to give up some weekends here and there frequently to run an ultra. But that's not where you need to start, and it doesn't need to be forever. And once you have that level of fitness, it's easier to maintain so you don't have to rebuild it, right? So it's going to be this work project, and you don't need to do it tomorrow, is the other thing. I think a lot of the time we end up in this really difficult training space because we didn't plan ahead. And then we realize, oh shit, I have a race in 3 months or whatever. And you are running not at all. So you're trying to go from 0 to 50 miles in 3 months, which, yeah, probably not great in general. And even if it works out for you, it's probably going to take over your life in order for you to achieve that well. So if we plan ahead a little bit, try not to rush it. You don't have to become this monk. I just trained this woman who just did very well on a 200 miler. Congrats, Celia. And she was mostly running like 4 times a week because struggling with shin splints. And we just leveraged a lot of cross training for the fitness. There were no shin splints out on the trail. So big trail weekends, lots of cross training, good amount of strength training. And it was great and didn't have to run 100 miles a week or whatever we thought we needed to do back in the 60s with Arthur Lydiard. Like it's just, you can hit this from a bunch of different directions. People take entire winters off to do skimo and backcountry skiing. People mountain bike a lot in the summer. Like this doesn't need to be your only activity. You also don't need to take some expensive supplement that's supposed to somehow make you faster. Like the thing that's going to make you faster is running faster. And yes, if you are deficient in something, maybe take a supplement. I take a few. I take magnesium, I take vitamin D, I take less of these things in the summer. But it's really hard to get vitamin D here in the winter. I take fish oil because I live in a desert and I know that the fatty acid profile is really good for my brain. But like, I don't, you don't need to take the greens powder stuff, either of them, multiple. There's many of these greens powders that tell you you're going to be a better athlete or a healthier human or whatever. And the big problem is they're expensive. Like you could just eat a salad, like that would be really great, and it wouldn't be $3 a day or $100 a month or whatever it is. Like there's a done them, by the way, used most of them. You don't need to do the beetroot stuff, right? I like beets. I think you should eat them. There's some stuff in beets that like does theoretically improve your nitric oxide, which will improve your endurance a little bit. Super cool. Does actually seem to work a little bit if you do it right. Um, Small improvements, like you could also, again, run more and run faster and do some strength training work, and you'll see far bigger improvements. You don't need to take whatever, like liquid ketones. Jesus, they taste like jet fuel, and then they try to flavor them with raspberry. Not great, but I mean, to be fair, they are alcohol, so that does make sense. But if we look at liquid ketones, you don't need that. Don't make you faster. Don't really provide whatever they provide an weird fuel that your body is confused about. They might be decent for recovery, but again, expensive. Like all of these things are just very pricey, and they put this barrier to entry for just getting started. Put your shoes on and go out the door. And on the line of shoes, like you don't need $250, $300 shoes with a carbon plate in them. Buy shoes that fit you and start. And then you might need to test a few once you learn that those don't fit as well as you thought you did. They did. But the only way you're going to figure that out is by going and starting. So buy some shoes, buy them at REI. They have a fantastic return policy. And then once you know exactly what you are, maybe support a local running star. But buy them at REI. They have a fantastic return policy. You can like trade them in if they just didn't fit for whatever reason. Don't abuse it. Don't break it for the rest of us. But like go see what works, try some things, go running, get out the door. You don't need to completely change your diet. You don't need to like become if you're a little more on the high fat side, you don't need to start consuming like professional athlete level carb loading carbs on a daily basis. And if you just eat like a normal human being, you sure as hell don't need to go keto, right? Like this does not need to be a thing. You don't need to run every day. I appreciate the run streaker people. Some of them I'm somewhat close with, but it's not necessary. You don't need to run every day. You sure as hell don't need to run with a fever. You don't need to run injured. Like all these three things tend to go together. If you're a run streaker person, you're probably going to either give up your streak at some point or run sick or injured. So don't do that. You do not have to be so focused on heart rate that it increases anxiety and sucks all the fun out of running. And this is a thing that I definitely see from deep in the heart rate crew, right? Like there's a lot of value to heart rate training. There's a lot of value to low heart rate training. There's a lot of value to understanding what your effort level is. And if you don't know how to clock that, then some work around heart rate can be very helpful. However, you don't need to be so focused on it that you are staring at your watch every 8 seconds on every run. Track your heart rate, maybe. If you're going to do it, probably use a chest strap. See, there we go. Another barrier to entry. Like, whatever. Figure out exactly, figure out some basics to monitor your effort level. Breathing tends to do really well in that if you're kind of breathing like this, where it's a little tough to take in air, but I could have a really full conversation, that's that zone 2 barrier. You're going to sit there pretty well, like stay below that most of the time, and then do some efforts a lot higher than that. Great place to start. You surely should not, do not have to wait for the perfect time when everything is calm. I get messages like this all the time where it's like, well, I'm going to start later because everything's so busy right now. Do you remember a time in your life when things weren't busy? Because I don't. If you do, then this might not be to you, and happy day. But I personally don't really remember a time in my life when things weren't busy. I'm busy now. I was busy when I was working 80 to 90-hour overnight shifts. Um, except when I like very specifically took an entire like summer off to go travel because I had the privilege of doing that as a 27-year-old snowcat driver. Um, I don't know when busy wasn't real, right? And I am on the lower end of things. Yes, I work a couple of jobs and I have a dog and I like train hard, but I don't have kids. Like if you have kids, you're always going to be busy forever. So that's not real. Like don't try to wait for the perfect time. Try to figure it out. I say this not to be like mean or overly aggressive or whatever. I think it's just an important thing to remember that we do the things, we act on the things that are actually our priorities, right? And I'm not saying this needs to be your priority. It's fine. If you don't actually want to pick a goal, then you don't have to. You're an adult, you can make that choice. The thing that really sets us into this like shame spiral and screws up our psyche is when we keep telling ourselves that, for example, running's a priority, and then we don't do it. Because then we feel like we're not acting on our priorities and we're not showing up for ourselves. Well, maybe you are. Maybe you just don't actually give a shit about it anymore. And that's absolutely okay. But stop telling yourself that it matters and then not doing anything about it because it clearly doesn't matter. And then you have this like contraposed story and action, and it just screws with you every day. So if it's not a priority, then great. And if you want it to be a priority, then we need to act like it's a priority and schedule the time. That's it. And yes, there's sometimes that's really hard. And if you are, you know, about to go through a wedding or whatever, then maybe now is not the time to train for a 100 miler. And that's also okay. But our stories and our actions should match. Because if not, then we're just gonna kind of end up in this shame spiral that isn't very good. As I said, like when we don't need to like follow whatever fear-mongering propaganda shows up on social media, and that includes like taking over your life or giving up or whatever, right? Like you just need to run if you want to do an ultra and train and block out the time a little bit. And then again, that can be tough, but in order to do this sport, it's just some level of sacrifice, a real desire to like do well, committing some time and doing the thing. But you certainly don't need the entire mess that is the internet in order to accomplish a fitness goal. People were running far, very in shape, and like hunting down animals with spears on foot long before we had $400 shoes and a $4 gel or ketone supplements or whatever. Most of these things just end up being a procrastination technique because, like, I'll start when whatever. Just start today. Go run for a bit, move some heavy things around, build a base volume, start getting strong. Once your base gets up a little bit, then add some speed work. If you want an idea of like what that looks like once you get going, the download the 50K plan I have. It's either in the show notes or somewhere on whatever page this is. But just get going. Because even that plan, I recommend you don't really drop into it until you're at 20 to 30 miles a week. Because it's not a beginner plan. It's not a return to run program. In order to return into running, it's just that. You just return to running. And you don't do it immediately. You do it frequently and often and pretty low volume at any one time. And you just let your body adapt, like make the movements it needs to make in order to create the adaptations you want to create, which if it's running, we need to run more. So this was kind of rambly and might not be my best, but I hope this was helpful. If you ever need anything, if you want help figuring this stuff out, please shoot me a message. I think a lot of the time, if we are accountable to someone else, then this tends to make this better. There are plenty of people I work with in the gym where they don't actually need me to be there. They spend a good amount of money to be there because they know they'll show up if they have to come meet me, you know? So if you need anything, please let me know. I'm happy to help. 50K plan somewhere in the notes somewhere. And shoot me a message if you want to chat. Hope you have a great rest of your day and go have fun on the trails.